High above, a powerful winged creature soared through the sky, spreading chaos over the city and driving people into desperate screams. They were enemies of humanity, beings that devoured entire civilizations. Even so, there were those who chose to be brave and fight these monsters, and that choice led to two different paths. The first was the path of mana flowing through the air, the path of mages, capable of performing supernatural feats. The second was the path of the swordsman, those who cultivated abilities beyond the ordinary within their own bodies, refining the energy of the sword. Faced with all challenges, only one path could be chosen, and once that choice was made, a person either succumbed to their own limitations or mastered that power completely. The great warrior who accomplished such a feat and defeated the creatures with courage and sagacity could become a sword saint. And this is the story of Lord Oscar, a warrior known for having achieved that title. After the defeat of the terrifying dragon, people and warriors alike gathered to congratulate him, unable to believe he had been on such a remote frontier of the city. Many thanked him for his help. However, Oscar coldly withdrew from the crowd, passing by the fragile villagers while reflecting on his choices. I chose the path of the sword, not magic, and as a swordsman, I reached the highest level. As he walked through the city, something caught his attention. A young man was demonstrating beautiful magic to a little girl. From the wand flowed thin, radiant threads, accompanied by small crackles, like delicate beams of light, leaving Oscar completely fascinated. He knew he had become someone admired by all, yet what he had always desired since childhood was magic, a longing that still burned strongly within him. In a secluded place, Oscar continued his sword training, fully focused on each movement and on his own strength. From a distance, two people watched him in silence. "Does the master train here every morning?" a girl asked, enchanted, as the young man beside her confirmed that he never missed a day. He said this was flat ground back when he was still a sword guide. At the spot where Oscar trained, a massive crater had formed due to the constancy of his practice, leaving the girl completely stunned. "You're kidding!" Once again, Oscar raised his sword and brought it down with power and precision, perfectly executed, making the young girl blush and swallow hard. The boy noticed she was gripping a scroll tightly and asked what it was. Startled, she remembered she needed to deliver it to Oscar and ran toward him, calling his name. It was a letter from the capital. Oscar read it in silence, sparking the girl's curiosity as she wondered whether it was bad news. "They said they're going to award me a medal for defeating the dragon. Honestly, I wish they'd think about what it's like to be summoned every single time." Awkwardly, the girl scratched her head and replied, "Only you would say something like that. With all your achievements, you could have secured an important position in the capital." Oscar then crumpled the letter, making it clear that he was tired of political disputes, and above all, unwilling to give up a place like that for training. The girl smiled and asked, "You really love swords, don't you, Meister?" The answer took a moment to come. After a brief silence, he replied that it wasn't love, but a choice. "I chose the sword because my father, a sword guide, told me to follow that path." The young girl was surprised. She couldn't believe he hadn't decided of his own free will. Even so, she confessed her envy. "You had talent for the sword, Master." She lowered her head and explained, "I enrolled in the sword academy of my own will, but I'm afraid that without the sword, I'll lose my own talent. Sometimes I wonder if I can still become a mage." At that moment, her hands trembled just thinking about it. Both mages and swordsmen draw power by channeling magic or sword energy through intertwined circuits within their bodies. However, these two powers are incompatible. Just as forcing air or water into a person's veins would bring immediate death, trying to impose one power onto circuits already saturated by the other causes them to collapse, reducing the body to ruin. That is why the choice of one of these paths profoundly shaped a person's entire future. Oscar placed a hand on the boy's shoulder and said, "If you're going to worry about it, swing your sword." That's what I did, and before I knew it, I ended up where I am now. Her eyes lit up, accompanied by a blush on her face. Later, Oscar lay in his bed, with only the moonlight illuminating the room. His thoughts wandered back to what he had said to the young apprentice, but he knew he wasn't a good example. The phrase echoed in his mind. "You had talent." He raised his hand and stared at it, thinking, "And what about my talent for magic?" Soon, he remembered his own advice. "If you're going to worry, swing the sword, right?" However, before he could think any further, he heard a loud crash and his eyes widened. A powerful explosion had already spread, accompanied by intense flames. Nearby, a mysterious group watched the fire with smiles on their faces. "Did you do this?" someone asked. "Your opponent is the sword saint. Don't let your guard down," another voice added. Suddenly, Oscar leaped out of the burning area, shocking everyone. They were extremely powerful mages, and at their center stood the leader, firmly holding a staff. The order was given, and the others extended their hands to cast spells, but Oscar dodged them all, making it look effortless. In moments, he reached the leader, only to be paralyzed by shock. "Could you lower your sword?" asked the man who was restraining the young apprentice. "I might accidentally hurt him." The boy had tears in his eyes, and even from a distance, his trembling body was visible. Oscar asked what their objective was, but the answer was not what he expected. "It's obvious. Your life." Firmly, Oscar replied, "I don't recall living in a way that would make people hate me." The mage burst into laughter, convinced that Oscar didn't remember his own deeds. "But we cannot forgive you, not only for your swordsmanship, but also for your magic, your very existence with such overwhelming talent." That left Oscar confused, unable to understand what they were talking about. The mage said nothing more. He raised his staff and caused a massive magic circle to appear in the sky. The young apprentice, who had managed to loosen the cloth binding his mouth, shouted, "Master, don't worry about me. I'm just an insignificant swordsman. I'm ready to die." Those words shocked Oscar. He gripped his sword, understanding their meaning, affirming that the boy was right, something that clearly wasn't part of the mage's plans. The situation spiraled out of control when Oscar decided not to surrender so easily and not to underestimate his disciples. Consumed by rage, the mage pointed his staff and unleashed countless sharp ice fragments toward him. Dust rose, completely shrouding the area after the impact. Even so, the mage remained standing, a confident smile on his face. What he didn't expect was to see one of his companions fallen behind him, a sword embedded in his chest, and before him stood Swordmaster Oscar, completely covered in blood, ice fragments piercing his body, yet still standing. Swordsmen truly are incomprehensible beings. The young apprentice ran desperately to Oscar. For the mages, their objective had already been accomplished, and so they took their leave, disappearing before the two of them. On the ground lay the sword saint, blessed with talent for magic, asking the young man if he was hurt. Distraught, the apprentice asked why his master had chosen to confront them. He wept as he heard Oscar say that he too was ready to die. Tears streamed down his face as he apologized and blamed himself for everything that had happened. Even exhausted, Oscar smiled and said that none of it was anyone's fault, yet he still remembered the mage and the girl from earlier. "If I were a mage, I could have done that too." Once again, he stared at his own hand, now stained with blood. His vision blurred, and the strength in his body slowly faded as he thought about how he had always wanted to use magic. Even so, he kept swinging his sword just to avoid facing that truth. He felt pride in his honor, in earning the respect and recognition of others, but compared to the emotion he had felt back then, he should already have fallen. And so it was, with his hands outstretched and his vision clouded, that everything around him changed. Green leaves fell onto his face. There was Oscar, a little younger, completely surprised, unable to understand what was happening. "Capiodo!" He sprang to his feet in alarm, questioning whether what lay before his eyes was truly his village. The wind blew fiercely, sending leaves cascading through the air, and ahead stood Eisen Village, Oscar's homeland. He understood that his life should have ended back then and could not comprehend what had happened. Beside him lay 2 letters placed beneath a sword, and he knew exactly what they were. "Invitations to the 2 great academies," he said in shock. "Young people about to turn 15. Receive an envelope from the kingdom containing invitations to the Magic Academy and the Sword Academy. The candidates choose their own path and present themselves at the corresponding academy with the invitation in hand." Still dazed, Oscar wondered if he had truly returned to the past. He gripped the letter bearing the blue crest tightly, and seeing his reflection in the water, became certain that he had gone back to being 14 years old before becoming a swordsman. His thoughts were interrupted by a heavy footstep. A man approached, his presence so overwhelming that it made Oscar swallow hard. "What are you doing in a place like this, Oscar?" the man asked. The protagonist rose quickly, stammering as he recognized who it was. It was his father. A rush of emotions overtook him at that instant. He had returned to the past, and his father was still alive. The man drew closer, saying that Oscar was growing arrogant with his abilities and neglecting his training. Oscar merely listened, head lowered. He knew he was not being negligent as his father believed. He was simply afraid to reveal his admiration for magic. His father accepted many disciples as a sword master, and as his son, Oscar had naturally learned the sword from him. With each advancement in his techniques, he received praise. However, one day, Oscar approached him excitedly and said he had seen magic, describing how bright and beautiful it was. His father grabbed him firmly and in a stern tone told him to listen carefully. "Magic is an art for the weak. You, my son, only need to swing the sword." Oscar froze at the exaggerated reaction. From that day on, he swung the sword so he would not be abandoned, unable to let go of it while suppressing his desire for magic. At that moment, his memories returned to the instant of his end. Choosing the sword in his past life had been enough, but with this new chance, he wanted to follow the path he truly desired. Holding the sword with trembling hands, he made his decision in silence. His father stared at him again and asked whether he was listening since he had not answered. "What were you doing while neglecting your training?" With resolve, Oscar replied, "I've stared at the sword enough for an entire lifetime." It sounded like an affront. His father's expression changed completely. Unable to contain his fury, countless swords began to float around him, radiant and golden. The men nearby could not remain standing under such pressure, but Oscar stayed firm, showing no sign of wavering. One of them was visibly surprised. "He can stay that calm?" The tension lasted only a moment before his father regained his composure. "It seems you weren't joking after all." He placed his hands on Oscar's shoulders and continued, "If you keep working this hard, one day I may entrust my guild to you." The others disliked the idea, grinding their teeth, but as Oscar's father turned to leave, he smiled with pride. Oscar remained standing until he received a hard slap on the back, nearly knocking the air out of him. The men approached with disdain and began to provoke him. "Hey, I waited through the academy's long recess just to see you, you know? Since we're here, I'll teach you the sword after all this time." Oscar showed no emotion at all. He remembered that they were former training companions because of his father. After entering the sword academy and awakening their sword aura, they had begun trying to teach him. As if venting accumulated frustrations, the two stood face to face. The young man wore a confident smile as his purple aura enveloped his sword. "Come on, get ready already." Oscar remained silent, analyzing the situation. The presence or absence of sword aura creates a gap that cannot be overcome by technique alone. Then he turned his back, startling the youth, who asked what he intended to do. Oscar raised the wooden sword, silently thanked everything that had led him there, and threw it into the lake. The others were shocked, but soon burst into laughter. "Planning to run away, you coward!" The young man charged immediately, shouting, "Abandoning the fight and turning your back! You're a disgrace to swordsmen!" Oscar stood still for a moment, then turned around with a broad smile, something that had not appeared on his face in a long time. He declared that he would no longer wield any sword, because at that moment he had decided to become a great Maiden.